Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Great to have you with us on the program today. As mentioned, our guest on the program is Sondra Sneed. She is a science and technology industry writer, former atheist with a secret, and she shares that on the program today. She's the author of the book, What to Do When You're Dead. A former atheist interviews the source of infinite being. Her website is sondrasneed.com. Of course, as always, you can go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and log on and link directly to Sondra's website. Sondra, welcome to the program. Great to have you with us on the show today.
Hi, Rick. Thank you for having me.
It is our pleasure. I love the book and so much to talk about during the course of the program
Great.
today. And I want to start talking about a title you have. I mentioned the fact that you're a science technology industry writer. You're also a God scribe, and I've not heard that term before. Explain exactly what that is, and then we'll get into your whole experience.
Well, I'd like to think that I coined the phrase, but then I Googled it, and somebody actually had godscribe.com. So obviously I didn't.
You must have been the second person to come up with that. I was sure when I read that, okay, this is unique. This is unique to Sondra.
I thought it was too. It was a moment of great inspiration. But no, that's someone, and there have been a number of them throughout history, that has the ability to interpret what would be the vibrational signature of the being we call God into words. I'm translating that into words. Our brain has the ability to interpret vibration as through the ear. Well, there's this mind that we're contained within, and my brain has the ability to translate that vibration from the great being into words.
Yes, and you talk about other people, and I think it goes back as far as 1875 and maybe even before that.
Right.
That was based on the foundation of Christian Science Church. So you've got some recent examples, but it goes back for quite a while.
Yeah, Moses being certainly the one of the first documented God scribes, at least in Western civilization. I'm sure ancient Hebrew. I don't know enough about ancient Hebrew to know more of them, but I do know for sure Moses was one of them. And apparently, I was interviewing with a man who knew that Muhammad was also one who took dictation from God, but I've never read the Quran, so I can't compare it to the work I've done in other God scribes that I'm familiar with.
Sondra Sneed is our guest on This Week in America. Her book is called What to Do When You're Dead. A former atheist interviews the source of infinite being. And let's talk about, first of all, your role as an atheist, because you were an atheist, you were a science writer, and then something happened. When we talk about atheism, tell me how strongly you felt that there really wasn't anything else out there.
Well, I became actually a science writer, believe it or not, after my moment that we haven't talked about with God. But before that, I was a photographer a corporate photographer. And as a photographer, the picture doesn't lie, or there was a time when pictures didn't lie. Right. So there was always this verification, well, let me back up. I grew up Christian evangelical. And I never, even though we went to vacation Bible school and church on Sundays, Sunday night, Wednesdays, I never really understood what everybody was singing about. I never had a relationship or an experience. And I guess I saw God as some authoritarian figure that people made up to control people. And then certainly through college, and philosophy classes, psychology, anthropology classes, science classes, there was really nothing in the literature to confirm the existence of a creator. And I, in my own experience, never had anything to change my mind. So I just disbelieved.
And this was up to, I believe, 2004. You're in your basement, in the basement in Secaucus, New Jersey, a rental property, and your life literally changed at that particular point in time. Let's go back and talk about that. You had just been fired. The man that you loved had left, And you said this was about as low as I've ever been in my life, and something transpired. Let's talk about that.
What happened was I'd always been a writer, and I was writing in a spiral notebook. I had learned from the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron how to write and write and write and turn off your inner editor so that you would increase your creative flow. So I began doing that. I was just writing and writing and writing, and that was just to quell the incredible emptiness that had come over me, loneliness, panic, the intense overwhelm of not being important to anyone. So as I kept writing and writing and writing, I filled up a full spiral notebook, and then I opened up another notebook and I put my pen on the top line, and it just kind of came out of my pen, unemployed, ? It is my assertion you are employed by me. And it's at that moment that I was no longer talking to a notebook, but the notebook began talking to me.
And this really changed your life at that point. And I think in the book, What to Do When You're Dead, you basically say that you really didn't even know you were writing until you stopped writing. And then that hit you that I've just been writing this down and really didn't even realize I was doing it.
Right. It was I put my pen and it was like, and then I went. And as I read it, first it was staring at the words on the page, noticing that my hand had moved to write, and then reading those words, and then realizing that those words were something communicating with me.
When did you realize what it was, who it was that was communicating with you, and what you really needed to do with that knowledge?
To be honest, the moment that I read that I realized something was talking to me was also the moment I knew it was God. Only those who have had an experience with God could probably really understand this. But when you know, it's a knowing, because whether you believe it or not, we are contained within God, and God is contained within us. And God is just a short word to call the source of being, the source of all being and infinite being, the source of our being, the source of evolution, the moment that, well, that's another tangent. I better not go down that road. But so when I was in the knowing of this great being, then I knew that I was talking to that which made all things, that which we call God.
Right. Sondra Sneed is our guest on, This Week in America. Her book is called What to Do When You're Dead. A former atheist interviews the source of infinite being. Her website is sondrasneed.com. You can go to our website as well, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on directly to Sondra's website. And you point out that God doesn't talk to you or whoever God is talking to like you and I are communicating now. It's a
Right.
whole different form of communication.
Right. God really will put me through a lot of linguistic riddles because it requires the mind to go deeper than the thinking brain. The thinking brain is designed to interpret information that we get from our senses, from the external world. Things that we read, things we see, things we hear, and helps us to interact with that. Let's call that the immediate memory. The part of us that is required to interact with our inner being, our formless being we call our soul, which is connected to spirit, connected to God. We have to reach below that thinking brain, and our self-awareness is no longer based on what's external to us, but what's what's internal. And that is also where dreams come from, and why dreams are so strange and difficult to decipher is because they work in a language that is almost the mirror of what we experience life externally to be. Does that make any sense?
It makes perfect sense. And you go through this period where you're sorting all of this out. I think it was like 7 years from the time that the 2004 situation came about. And you decided after that to write the book. Before you actually wrote the book and the book was published, what was it like during that 7-year period? Did you vacillate? Were there times when you're thinking, my reputation's at stake here? Do I go forward with this information? Do I share this? Do I keep it to myself? Do I wait another year or two to see how this plays out? How difficult was that process?
Well, the one thing that I don't know that we've mentioned yet, but I spent a year from that moment, I spent a year in isolation and solitude, in dialogue with God, and I filled up 10 spiral notebooks during that time. And those notebooks will probably one day be published. But so I had those, and I called them the Magnificent Means. And then I left New York, and I moved down to Houston, Texas to be near my best girlfriend. And I met my husband within 3 days of coming down here. And so I kind of embarked on a brand new, beautiful life of domesticity and joy in normalcy. And then, and rewarding, feeling rewarded for that time I spent in solitude with God. Then, at a certain point, I met someone, and I slowly began meeting people in the metaphysical community here in Houston who would be very receptive to hear about my experience. And the more people asked about the experience and became excited and wanted to know more, the more I realized that I'm not hiding, that I'm hiding in a closet that I need to step out of. And as you may have read in the first chapter, God says very clearly, I was born for this mission, and I'm finally just now having enough faith to take on the mission.
Sondra Sneed is our guest on the program This Week in America, author of the book What to Do When You're Dead. A former atheist interviews the source of infinite being. Rapidly running out of time on the program today, and there's so many interesting points we want to talk about. We'll have Sondra back on future programs. One is to really find happiness, and all of us are trying to look, okay, how can we enter happiness in our lives? It's very difficult to do. You say it really starts with understanding why we're here.
Yeah, and what we are.
Yes.
You know, you have to be willing to enter a realm of madness first, because you have to disengage your identification with everything that the world tells you you are. And suddenly, from that point, you began to look at what you truly are, which is more amazing and more perfect than anyone on earth will tell you. Because God will tell you, you were born perfect, you were born free, and you are perfect. And the only people who are going to tell you that you're imperfect are those who have some expectation on what you should be, and you're not living up to their expectation. But you were born to be exactly what you are. So happiness comes from a deeper relationship with yourself, and then connecting that self to the mind of God that made you.
When you go through something like this, and again, the book is called What to Do When You're Dead, a former atheist interviews the source of infinite being. Sondra Sneed is our guest on the program. So much information you'll find at the website, sondrasneed.com. The book is available all across the country. When you go through a transformation like this, how has it changed your life in the sense that, are you a regular churchgoer? Do you worship? So many people have this perception of God and how we would respond to God. In reading the book, that's doesn't appear to be really the relationship.
No, what's interesting is that even Jesus said, you are the church. And that's been so misinterpreted what Jesus meant is that that God is within you and you within God. So your relationship with yourself and your relationship with God within yourself is the church. That there is no temple, no congregation, no pastor, no reverend, no bishop, no pope that is going to take you to God. You must find God within you, and the reverence of that is within your heart. And as you grow and open your heart, the greater your church becomes.
It's a fascinating and challenging new book, What to Do When You're Dead. A former atheist interviews the source of infinite being. Sondra Sneed, our guest on This Week in America. Her website is sondrasneed.com. Link onto our website, thisweekinamerica.us, to get more information as well. You mentioned in there in the book, the logical mind can't comprehend the God mind. And I guess that answers some of the questions that are difficult to answer. There really is no answer. We're trying to think of it the way man thinks of it, and we're not at the same level. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Because even if we just use science as our base of information for all existence, science can only give us what science knows and observes. And then it has to go through the scientific method, which requires all kinds of tests and controls that are nowhere near the origin of all time and space and timelessness. So, our language is rooted in limitations. So, to understand God based on what man says God is to look up the stars and count them on one hand. You must be in an area like New York City where there's so much light pollution you can't see the stars. You have to go somewhere where there is nothing man-made so that you can see the universe that you're contained within.
Why is this message so important for you to communicate to us and for us to read?
Well, in this particular book, God talks about so many things. But in particular, the reason the title, What to Do When You're Dead, is that human beings are on a path of self-destruction. God explains why that is and how that is. But human beings have been doing that for thousands and thousands of years, for millennia, as evidence in ancient ruins around the world. What's different about this time, God says, is that we are poisoning our own food supply, and we may not make it back from the small band of humans that are left after we wipe ourselves out, because we are poisoning our food supply. And the problem with that is that if there are no human beings left on earth to pray the souls that get trapped on earth to the source of being that they're supposed to go to next, then these souls become literally lost forever. And it's our job as human beings to protect all life on earth, including the souls of mortal souls of humankind. And the reason that these souls get trapped is because they either cannot forgive themselves or they can't forgive someone else. There's something unfinished, and they think that all they are is this body, and that in thinking that all they are is this body, that impression becomes an apparition. That apparition becomes attached to the past of the life of that body, and then trapped on the earth. And only other human beings can help pray them and release them back to their where they need to go.
It's an important book, What to Do When You're Dead. A former atheist interviews the source of infinite being. Sondra Sneed has been our guest on This Week in America. The website for Sondra is sondrasneed.com. Sondra is Sondra, Sneed, SNEED.com. Of course, that information at our website, you can log on to thisweekinamerica.us and link directly to Sondra's website. Information there on the book. The book is available all across the country, and a lot of great information on the website as well. Sondra, much more to talk about. Hopefully we can have you back in the program. Thank you so much for being with us on the show today. We appreciate it.
I totally appreciate it. You just have no idea how much. Thank you so much, Rick.
It was our pleasure. You're listening to This Week in America and the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network.